The worst part about working in the Arctic is not the cold, not the isolation, not even the 6 months of darkness. It is the silence. The kind of silence that makes you hear your own heartbeat in your ears, that makes every breath sound like a scream. I had grown accustomed to it during my 3 years at the Kodiak Research Station, a genetics facility buried beneath the ice in northern Alaska. But on the night of February 14th at exactly 2:47 a.m., that silence was broken by something I will never forget. It was not an alarm. It was not a voice over the intercom. It was a sound that should not exist in nature, a sound that made my blood freeze colder than the air outside. And in that moment, I knew that Subject 17 had finally done what we all feared it would do. It had escaped. Before I tell you what happened in those final hours, before I explain what we created in that frozen hell beneath the ice, I need you to understand something. If you have ever wondered what happens when science pushes too far, when humanity decides to play God in the most literal sense, then stay with me. And if you are hearing this story, if you are listening to these words right now, do me a favor. Leave a comment below and tell me if you believe what I am about to share. Because sometimes I still wonder if any of it was real, or if the isolation finally broke my mind. But the scars on my hands tell me otherwise. The nightmares tell me otherwise. My name is Nathan, and I am 32 years old. Or at least I was 32 when this all began. I am not entirely sure what I am anymore. I was a molecular biologist, one of the youngest researchers ever recruited to the Kodiak Research Station. The facility was not on any map. It did not officially exist in any government database. We were told it was a privately funded operation, backed by a coalition of pharmaceutical companies and defense contractors interested in pushing the boundaries of genetic manipulation. Our mission was simple, at least on paper. We were to explore the limits of human DNA, to unlock the dormant sequences that evolution had left behind, to find out what humanity could become if we removed the biological restrictions that nature had imposed. I arrived at Kodiak in November, 3 years before the incident. The flight from Anchorage took 4 hours in a cargo plane with no windows, and when we finally landed, I stepped out onto a landscape that looked like the surface of another planet. Snow stretched in every direction, unbroken and pristine, glowing blue under the winter sun that barely crested the horizon. The temperature was 40 degrees below zero, cold enough that my first breath felt like inhaling broken glass. The facility itself was invisible from the surface. All you could see was a small cluster of prefabricated buildings, housing for the security team and a landing pad for supply drops. Everything else, the labs, the living quarters, the containment units, was buried 300 feet beneath the permafrost. There were 12 of us on the research team. Dr. Raymond Hoffman was our director, a man in his late 50s with gray hair and the kind of tired eyes that suggested he had seen things he wished he could forget. He never talked about his previous work, but rumor had it he had been involved in classified projects for the military, experiments that had been shut down for ethical violations. Then there was Dr. Lisa Kowalski, our lead geneticist, brilliant and obsessive, the kind of person who would work for 36 hours straight without sleeping. She was the one who designed the modification protocols for Subject 17. The rest of the team was a mix of biologists, medical doctors, and technicians. There was James, a soft-spoken virologist from Boston. There was Rebecca, a neurologist who rarely smiled. There was David, our senior lab tech, always cracking jokes to cut through the tension. There was Emily, a biochemist from Denver with a nervous laugh. There was Robert, a quiet man who managed the data systems. There was Patricia, who handled our specimen storage. And then there were 3 others, technicians whose names I barely remember now, whose faces have blurred together in my memory. We were all young, all ambitious, all desperate to make our mark on the world. None of us understood what we were truly working on until it was too late. The facility itself was a marvel of engineering. The elevator ride down from the surface took nearly 3 minutes, a slow descent through solid ice and rock. The walls of the elevator shaft were transparent, and you could see the layers of ice pressing in from all sides, blue and white and ancient. When the doors opened, you stepped into a world of sterile white corridors, fluorescent lights, and the constant hum of ventilation systems. The air was recycled, pumped through filters and heated to a comfortable 70 degrees. It smelled like disinfectant and ozone, with an underlying metallic tang that I could never quite identify. The main research level housed our labs, all of them sealed behind multiple layers of security: keycard access, retinal scanners, biometric locks. Each lab was specialized. Lab 1 was for genetic sequencing. Lab 2 was for protein synthesis. Lab 3 was where we cultivated the modified cell lines. Lab 4 was the surgical suite, where the initial modifications were performed on the subjects. Everything was pristine. Everything was controlled. Everything was designed to prevent contamination or escape. Below that was the residential level, where we slept in small, windowless rooms that felt more like prison cells than living quarters. Each room was identical: a single bed, a desk, a small closet. No decorations were allowed, no personal items beyond the essentials. The walls were white, the floors were white, everything was white. It was meant to be calming, sterile, but after a few months the whiteness started to feel oppressive, like living inside a blank page. The common areas were slightly better. There was a cafeteria where we ate our meals together, though the food was all prepackaged and tasteless. There was a small gym with a treadmill and some weights. There was a recreation room with a television that only played old movies and documentaries. No news, no connection to the outside world. We were allowed to use the internet for 1 hour per day, but all our communications were monitored, and we were forbidden from discussing our work with anyone outside the facility. Below the residential level was containment: 3 separate floors, each one more restricted than the last. Containment Level 1 was for biological samples and tissue cultures. Containment Level 2 was for animal subjects, rats and primates that we used for preliminary testing. And Containment Level 3, the deepest level of the facility, was where the human subjects were kept. We were not allowed to talk about what happened in containment. It was against protocol to discuss the subjects outside of official research meetings, but everyone knew. Everyone whispered in the cafeteria, in the hallways, in the darkness of their rooms late at night. We were not just manipulating DNA in a petri dish. We were creating something new, something that had never existed before. The subjects were volunteers, or at least that is what we were told. They were people who had nothing left to lose, terminal patients who had been given months to live, prisoners serving life sentences who had agreed to participate in exchange for reduced sentences for their families, homeless individuals who had been promised money and care. I do not know if any of that was true. I never met any of them before they became subjects. By the time I arrived at Kodiak, they were already in containment, already transformed, already something other than human. Subject 17 was our most ambitious project. The others, subjects 1 through 16, had all failed in various ways. Some had died within hours of the genetic modifications being activated. Their bodies rejected the changes, their organs shutting down one by one. Others had survived but developed catastrophic health issues, tumors that grew at an exponential rate, organ failure, neurological breakdown. One subject, subject 9, had developed a mutation that caused its bones to grow uncontrollably, piercing through the skin in jagged spikes. It died screaming, begging us to end its suffering. We did. Dr. Hoffman injected it with a lethal dose of morphine, and we incinerated the body according to protocol. Subject 17 was different. It survived. It thrived. And it changed in ways we had not anticipated, in ways that defied every model and prediction we had made. I remember the first time I saw it. This was about 6 months into my assignment. Dr. Hoffman had finally granted me clearance to access Containment Level 3, where the live subjects were kept. I took the elevator down with Lisa, both of us silent, both of us nervous. The elevator doors opened with a soft hiss, and we stepped into a long corridor lined with observation rooms. The corridor was dimly lit, the lights overhead flickering occasionally. The air was colder here, kept at 50 degrees to slow down any biological processes in case of contamination. Each observation room had a reinforced glass wall, 2 feet thick, designed to withstand enormous pressure. Behind each wall was a cell, 10 feet by 10 feet, with a drain in the floor and a single metal bed bolted to the concrete. The walls of the cells were made of poured concrete, smooth and featureless. There were no windows, no decorations, nothing to indicate that a living being was meant to inhabit these spaces. Most of the cells were empty. Subjects 1 through 16 were gone, their remains incinerated according to protocol. But at the end of the hall in the last cell was Subject 17. It looked human. That was the first thing that struck me. It was sitting on the bed, its back against the wall, staring at nothing. It was male, or at least it had been male before the modifications. It was naked, its skin pale and smooth, almost translucent. You could see the veins beneath the surface, pulsing with something that was not quite blood. The liquid in its veins was darker, thicker, with a faint luminescence that made the skin glow softly in the dim light. Its eyes were open, but they were wrong. The irises were too large, too dark, like pools of oil. And when it blinked, it did not blink the way a human blinks. The eyelids closed from the sides instead of from the top and bottom, a horizontal motion that made my stomach turn. Its hair was long and white, not gray but pure white like snow. Its face was gaunt, the cheekbones sharp, the jawline angular. It looked like something carved from marble, beautiful and terrible at the same time. Subject 17, Lisa said, her voice clinical and detached. She pulled out a tablet and began reading from the file. Male, age 28 at the time of modification. We introduced a custom gene sequence designed to activate dormant evolutionary pathways. The goal was to enhance regenerative capabilities, increase cognitive function, and extend the cellular lifespan indefinitely. Indefinitely, I asked, unable to take my eyes off the thing in the cell. Theoretically, it should not age, Lisa said. Its cells are in a state of perpetual renewal. Every time a cell divides, the telomeres are rebuilt rather than shortened. It should be functionally immortal. Should be. We will see. The modifications have only been active for 18 months. We are still in the early stages of observation. I stepped closer to the glass, peering at Subject 17. It had not moved since we entered the room. It just sat there, staring at the opposite wall, its expression blank and empty. Does it speak? I asked. It used to, Lisa said. For the first few months after the modification, it was responsive. It would answer questions, follow commands. Its cognitive function was actually enhanced. It could solve complex mathematical problems in seconds. It had perfect recall of everything it had ever experienced. But about 3 weeks ago, it stopped. Now it just sits there, watching, waiting. Waiting for what? Lisa did not answer. She just looked at Subject 17, and for a moment I saw something flicker in her eyes. Fear, maybe, or regret. Subject 17 turned its head and looked directly at me. It did not smile. It did not frown. Its expression was blank, empty, as if it was looking at something that did not matter. But I felt something in that gaze, something cold and vast and utterly inhuman. I took a step back, my heart pounding. Can it see us? I asked. The glass is one way, Lisa said. From its perspective, the wall is just a mirror. It should not be able to see us. Then why is it looking at me? Lisa did not answer. She turned away from the glass and walked back to the elevator. I followed her, glancing back over my shoulder. Subject 17 was still watching me, its dark eyes unblinking, its head tilted slightly to one side like a curious animal. Over the next 2 years, I spent hundreds of hours observing Subject 17. It became my primary research focus. We ran tests, collected samples, monitored its vitals. Its body temperature was lower than a normal human, hovering around 92 degrees. Its heart rate was slow, 40 beats per minute, steady and rhythmic like a metronome. It did not eat much. We provided meals 3 times a day, standard protein rations and nutrient supplements, but it would only take a few bites, just enough to sustain itself. Its metabolism had changed, become more efficient. It could extract energy from food at a rate far beyond normal human capability. It did not sleep, or at least we never saw it sleep. The cameras in its cell ran 24 hours a day, recording every moment, and in all that time, Subject 17 never closed its eyes for more than a few seconds. We theorized that its brain had been modified in such a way that it no longer required sleep, that it had developed a method of resting while remaining conscious. But we could not be sure. There was so much about Subject 17 that we did not understand. But the strangest thing was its behavior. It was too calm, too controlled. It never panicked, never raged, never showed any sign of distress. It just sat there day after day, watching the cameras with those dark, unblinking eyes. Sometimes it would stand and walk around the cell, tracing its fingers along the walls, pressing its palm against the glass. Sometimes it would lie on the bed and stare at the ceiling. But it never spoke. It never made a sound. And sometimes, late at night, when I was alone in the observation room, I swore I could feel it watching me back. Not through the camera, through something else, something deeper. It was as if it could sense me on the other side of the glass, as if it knew exactly where I was and what I was thinking. I mentioned this to Dr. Hoffman once, and he told me I was being paranoid, that the isolation was getting to me. But I knew what I felt, and I was not the only one. Rebecca told me that she had the same sensation whenever she was in the observation room. She said it felt like Subject 17 was inside her head, poking around, examining her thoughts. James said he had nightmares about it, dreams where Subject 17 would stand at the foot of his bed and whisper things he could not understand. Even Lisa, who had always been so confident, so in control, started to look hollow, her eyes ringed with dark circles, her hands shaking whenever she held her coffee cup. Dr. Hoffman assured us that everything was under control. The containment protocols were foolproof, he said. The cell was designed to hold something far stronger than Subject 17. The glass was bulletproof and shatterproof, capable of withstanding the impact of a car traveling at high speed. The door was reinforced steel, 3 inches thick, with magnetic locks that required a biometric scan to open. There were motion sensors, thermal sensors, pressure sensors, all feeding data back to the control room. And if anything went wrong, if Subject 17 somehow breached containment, the entire level could be flooded with liquid nitrogen in under 30 seconds, freezing everything inside to a temperature of negative 300 degrees. But protocols are only as good as the people who follow them, and people make mistakes. It started small, little things that we ignored because we were tired, because we were overworked, because we wanted to believe that nothing could go wrong. The security logs showed anomalies, doors opening and closing at odd hours when no one was scheduled to be in those areas, cameras glitching, their feeds cutting out for a few seconds before coming back online, temperature fluctuations in containment level 3, brief spikes and drops that did not match any known environmental factors. We ran diagnostics, checked the systems, found nothing. Dr. Hoffman blamed it on the cold, on the age of the facility, on electromagnetic interference from the Arctic storms that raged outside. He ordered the maintenance team to inspect the wiring, to recalibrate the sensors, to reinforce the door seals. They did all of that, and the anomalies continued. Then in early February, David noticed something strange. He was reviewing footage from Subject 17's cell, going through weeks of recordings to compile a behavior analysis report. And he saw something that should not have been possible. In one frame, Subject 17 was sitting on the bed, staring at the camera. In the next frame, it was standing in the corner of the cell, its face pressed against the glass. But there was no motion between the 2 frames, no transition. It was as if it had teleported across the room in the blink of an eye. David showed the footage to Dr. Hoffman, who dismissed it as a glitch. "The cameras are old," he said. "They skip frames sometimes. It is nothing." But David was not convinced. He started watching the live feed more carefully, spending hours in the observation room, his eyes glued to the monitors. And he saw it again and again. Subject 17 was moving too fast for the cameras to register. One moment it would be in one place, the next moment somewhere else, with no indication of how it had gotten there. It was as if it had learned to move between the frames, to exist in the spaces that the cameras could not see. "We need to increase sedation," David said during a meeting. His voice was strained, his face pale. "This thing is not stable. It is adapting. It is learning." "It is perfectly stable," Dr. Hoffman snapped. "We are not going to compromise the integrity of the experiment because of a few camera errors." "These are not camera errors," David insisted. "This thing is evolving. It is becoming something we cannot control, and we have no idea what it is becoming." Dr. Hoffman slammed his hand on the table, the sound echoing through the conference room. "Enough. We will continue monitoring Subject 17 according to protocol. If there are any significant changes in its condition, we will adjust accordingly. But I will not authorize sedation based on speculation and paranoia." The meeting ended. We went back to work, and we tried to forget what we had seen. But I could not forget. I started having dreams about Subject 17. In the dreams, I was standing in its cell, and it was standing in front of me, close enough to touch. It would reach out with one pale hand, its fingers long and thin, and it would press its palm against my chest. And I would feel something cold spreading through my body, seeping into my bones, freezing me from the inside out. And then it would open its mouth, and instead of words, a sound would come out, that same sound I heard on the night of the escape. A low, resonant hum that vibrated through my bones, that made my teeth ache, that made me feel like my skull was splitting open. And then I would wake up, gasping, my sheets soaked with sweat, my heart hammering in my chest. I was not the only one. Rebecca told me she was having nightmares too. She said she dreamed that Subject 17 was standing outside her door, scratching at the metal, whispering her name. James said he could not sleep anymore without medication, that every time he closed his eyes he saw Subject 17's face, pale and expressionless, staring at him from the darkness. Even Lisa, who had always been so rational, so grounded in science, admitted that she was struggling. She told me one night, over coffee in the empty cafeteria, that she regretted creating Subject 17, that she wished she could go back and undo everything they had done. "We should never have done this," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "We should never have tried to play God." "It is too late now," I said. "I know," she said, "and that is what terrifies me." February 14th, Valentine's Day, a date that should have been ordinary, meaningless in a place like Kodiak where time had no real significance. But it was the day everything fell apart. I was in my quarters, lying on my bed, staring at the ceiling. It was late past midnight, though I had no real sense of time anymore. The days blurred together in the darkness of the Arctic winter. The sun never rose this time of year, and the only light came from the fluorescent bulbs overhead, harsh and artificial. I was about to close my eyes when the lights flickered. Once, twice. Then the emergency sirens began to wail. The sound was deafening, a high-pitched scream that cut through the silence like a knife. I sat up, my heart hammering in my chest. The sirens only went off for two reasons: fire or containment breach. I grabbed my jacket and ran into the hallway. Other researchers were emerging from their rooms, all of us confused, all of us terrified. David was at the far end of the corridor, his face pale, his eyes wide. "What is happening?" I shouted over the noise. "It is out," David said, his voice shaking. "Subject 17, it is out." The world seemed to tilt. I felt like I was falling, even though my feet were still on the ground. How? I do not know. The door just opened. The locks disengaged. It walked out. "That is impossible," I said. "The locks require a biometric scan. And even if it somehow got past that, There are 3 more layers of security between containment and the main facility. I know, David said, but it is out. I saw it on the cameras. We ran to the control room where Dr. Hoffman and Lisa were already pulling up camera feeds. The room was chaos, technicians shouting over each other, alarms blaring, red lights flashing on every console. The screens showed empty corridors, flickering lights, shadows moving just out of frame. And then, on one of the monitors, we saw it. Subject 17 was on containment level 2, walking slowly down the corridor. It was still naked, its skin glowing faintly in the dim light. It moved with a strange, fluid grace, its limbs bending in ways that did not seem natural. And it was smiling. For the first time since the modifications, it was smiling. Lock down the level, Dr. Hoffman barked. Seal every door, activate the nitrogen protocol. The technician at the control panel hesitated. Sir, if we flood the level, anyone still down there will. Do it. The technician pressed a series of buttons. On the screen, we saw the containment doors slam shut, massive steel barriers dropping from the ceiling like guillotines. But Subject 17 did not stop. It walked up to one of the doors, placed its hand on the steel and pushed. The door buckled. The metal groaned, a sound like a wounded animal, and then it tore free from its hinges, crashing to the floor with a deafening clang. Oh my God, Lisa whispered. Subject 17 stepped through the doorway and continued walking. It was heading for the elevator. It was heading for the surface. We need to evacuate, I said. We need to get out of here. There is nowhere to go, Dr. Hoffman said. We are 300 feet underground. The only way out is through the elevator, and that thing is heading straight for it. Then what do we do? Dr. Hoffman did not answer. He just stared at the screen, his face gray, his hands trembling. The next few hours were chaos. We tried everything. We locked the elevator. Subject 17 pried the doors open and climbed the shaft, its fingers digging into the metal walls, pulling itself up hand over hand. We activated the emergency sprinklers, flooding the corridors with freezing water. It walked through it without slowing, the water steaming as it made contact with its skin. We cut the power, plunging the entire facility into darkness. And in the dark, we heard it moving, its footsteps echoing through the halls, slow and deliberate like the ticking of a clock. One by one, we lost contact with the security team. They had been stationed on the surface level, armed with tranquilizer guns and tasers. We heard their voices over the radio, panicked and screaming. And then silence, just static and the sound of wind howling across the ice. By 4:00 a.m., Subject 17 had reached the residential level. We barricaded ourselves in the control room, pushing desks and chairs against the door, stacking computer monitors and filing cabinets into a makeshift wall. There were 8 of us left. Dr. Hoffman, Lisa, David, Rebecca, James, and 3 technicians whose names I cannot remember. We sat in the dark, the only light coming from the emergency backup system, listening to the sounds outside. Footsteps, breathing. That low, resonant hum that made my bones ache. And then the door began to shake. The barricade rattled, desks shifting, chairs falling to the floor. Something was pushing from the other side, something immensely strong. The metal door buckled inward, the hinges groaning under the pressure. It knows we are in here, Rebecca whispered. Stay quiet, Dr. Hoffman hissed. But it did not matter. Subject 17 was not hunting us by sound. It was hunting us by something else. Something we did not understand. It could sense us, feel us, like we were all connected by invisible threads that it could pull whenever it wanted. The door exploded inward, the barricade scattering like toys. Wood splintered, metal twisted, and the whole thing came crashing down in a shower of debris. And there it was, standing in the doorway, silhouetted by the emergency lights in the hallway. It looked at us, one by one, its dark eyes reflecting nothing. And then it spoke. Thank you, it said. Its voice was soft, almost gentle, like a parent talking to a child. For giving me this. Giving you what? Lisa asked, her voice shaking. Subject 17 smiled. Everything. It stepped into the room and I could see it more clearly now. Its skin was not just pale, it was luminescent, glowing with a soft white light. Its veins pulsed with that dark, thick liquid, and I could see it moving beneath the surface, flowing through its body like rivers on a map. Its eyes were not just dark, they were endless, like looking into the void of space. And when it moved, it did not walk so much as glide, its feet barely touching the floor. David lunged at it with a fire extinguisher, swinging with all his strength. The extinguisher connected with Subject 17's head with a sickening crunch, the sound of metal hitting bone. But it did not fall. It did not even flinch. It reached out, wrapped its hand around David's throat and lifted him off the ground. David's eyes went wide, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water, his hands clawing at Subject 17's fingers. And then Subject 17 squeezed. There was a wet, crunching sound, and David went limp. It dropped his body and turned to the rest of us. We ran. We scattered, fleeing through the corridors, each of us trying to find somewhere, anywhere to hide. I do not know what happened to the others. I heard screams behind me, echoing through the halls, but I did not stop. I could not stop. I ran until my lungs burned, until my legs felt like they were going to give out, and then I found a maintenance closet and locked myself inside. I sat there in the dark, pressing my hands over my mouth to stifle my breathing, listening to the sounds of the facility being torn apart. Metal scraping, glass shattering, screaming, always screaming, and then at some point the sound stopped. The facility fell silent. I waited in that closet for what felt like hours, too terrified to move, too terrified to even breathe. And then I heard it, footsteps, slow and deliberate, coming closer. I pressed myself into the corner, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would burst. The footsteps stopped right outside the door. I could see the shadow of something standing there, blocking the light from under the door. And then I heard its voice. Nathan. It knew my name. Nathan, I know you are in there. I did not move. I did not breathe. You do not need to be afraid, it said. I am not going to hurt you. I just want to talk. I still did not answer. You were kind to me, it said. You did not treat me like a monster. You looked at me like I was still human. And I want you to know that I remember that. I remember everything. There was a long pause, and then the footsteps moved away, fading into the distance. I stayed in that closet for another 6 hours, and when I finally gathered the courage to open the door, the facility was empty. Subject 17 was gone. The bodies of my colleagues were gone. The security team was gone. It was as if everyone had simply vanished. I found the elevator. It was still operational. I took it to the surface, stepping out into the blinding white of the Arctic morning. The sun was rising, a pale disk on the horizon. The temperature was 60 degrees below zero, but I barely felt it. I was numb. The supply plane was scheduled to arrive in 3 days. I waited in one of the surface buildings, wrapped in every blanket I could find, rationing the food that had been left behind. And during those 3 days, I saw it. Subject 17. It was out there on the ice, walking toward the horizon. It never looked back. It just walked and walked until it disappeared into the white. When the supply plane arrived, I told them everything. They did not believe me. They thought I had lost my mind, that the isolation and the stress had broken me. They sent a team down to investigate and they found nothing. No bodies, no evidence, just an empty facility with all the security footage wiped clean. They said it was impossible. They said I must have imagined it. But I know what I saw. I know what we created. Subject 17 is still out there, somewhere, walking through the world looking human, acting human, but being something else entirely. Something we were never meant to create. And sometimes, late at night, I wonder if it is still thinking about me, if it is still remembering the way I looked at it. And I wonder if one day it will come back. If you have made it this far, if you have listened to my story, then do me one more favor. Share this. Tell everyone you know, because I need people to understand what happened in that frozen hell beneath the ice. I need people to know that we went too far. And maybe, just maybe, if enough people know, we can stop it from happening again. I still work in genetics. I had nowhere else to go, no other skills that mattered. But now I work at a small university lab in Portland, Oregon, studying harmless things like fruit flies and bacteria. Nothing dangerous, nothing that could hurt anyone. And every day I check the news, searching for reports of strange occurrences, unexplained disappearances, people who seem normal on the surface but are not quite right. Because I know that Subject 17 is still evolving, still changing. And I know that one day it will reveal itself. And when that day comes, I hope humanity is ready. But I do not think we will be. The Arctic taught me something important. It taught me that there are limits we should not cross, boundaries we should not breach. It taught me that some things are meant to remain locked away in the dark, buried beneath the ice, where they cannot hurt anyone. But we did not listen. We pushed forward, driven by ambition and curiosity and the arrogant belief that we could control anything we created. We were wrong. I have not spoken to any of the other survivors. I do not know if there are any other survivors. The official report says that the Kodiak research station was shut down due to structural failures caused by shifting permafrost. Everyone who worked there was transferred to other assignments, scattered across the country, forbidden from discussing what happened. I signed a non-disclosure agreement backed by the threat of legal action and worse. But I do not care anymore. I cannot keep this secret. I cannot live with this weight pressing down on my chest, suffocating me. So I am telling you, I am breaking my silence. And if they come for me, if I disappear like the others, then you will know why. Subject 17 was not the only experiment. There were others. Projects running in parallel, funded by the same shadowy organizations, all of them pushing the boundaries of what humanity could become. And if Subject 17 was just one success among many failures, then how many more are out there? How many more monsters are we creating in the name of progress? I do not have the answers, but I have the questions, and I hope that someone somewhere will listen. The last time I checked the news, there was a report from a small town in Montana. A hiker had gone missing in the mountains, and when the search party found him 3 days later, he was sitting on a rock, staring at the sky. He was unharmed, but he did not recognize his family. He did not remember his own name, and when they asked him what happened, he just smiled and said, "I am better now." I do not know if it was Subject 17, but I know it could have been, and that terrifies me more than anything else. Because the thing about monsters is that they do not always look like monsters. Sometimes they look like us. They walk among us, talk like us, smile like us. And by the time we realize what they are, it is too late. Let me tell you more about my time at Kodiak, about the things I witnessed before everything fell apart. Because there were signs, warning signs that we all ignored. And maybe if I had paid more attention, if any of us had paid more attention, we could have stopped it before it was too late. The facility had a rhythm to it, a routine that we all followed like clockwork. Wake up at 6:00 a.m. Breakfast in the cafeteria at 6:30 a.m. Work in the labs from 7:00 a.m. to 6:00 p.m. Dinner at 7:00 p.m. Free time until 10:00 p.m. Lights out at 11:00 p.m. Every day was the same, an endless loop of work and sleep and work again. The monotony was suffocating, but it was also comforting in its own way. It gave us structure, kept us sane in a place where the outside world ceased to exist. But about a year before the escape, things started to change. Small changes at first, barely noticeable. Dr. Hoffman became more secretive, holding meetings behind closed doors that only a select few were invited to attend. Lisa spent more time in containment level 3, sometimes staying down there for 12 hours straight, refusing to take breaks or eat meals. When I asked her what she was working on, she would just shake her head and say, "You will see soon enough." The changes in Subject 17 were even more subtle. Its physical appearance remained the same, that pale, translucent skin, those dark, endless eyes, but its behavior shifted. It started moving more, packing around itself for hours at a time, tracing patterns on the walls with its fingers. We analyzed the patterns, ran them through computer programs, tried to find meaning in them. Some looked like mathematical equations, others looked like maps, and some looked like writing in a language that did not exist. Rebecca was the one who noticed the connection. She had been studying Subject 17's brain activity, monitoring the electrical signals that fired through its neurons, and she discovered something extraordinary. Subject 17's brain was not just functioning at a higher level than a normal human. It was functioning at a level that should not be possible. It was using 100% of its brain capacity, every neuron firing in perfect synchronization, creating patterns of thought that were impossibly complex. "It is thinking at a rate thousands of times faster than we are," Rebecca told me one day. We were in the observation room, watching Subject 17 through the glass. It was standing in the center of its cell, perfectly still, its eyes closed. Every second that passes for us is like hours for it. Days, maybe. It is experiencing time differently than we do. "What is it thinking about?" I asked. "I do not know," Rebecca said, "but I think it is planning something." I reported this to Dr. Hoffman, but he dismissed it. "Subject 17 is contained," he said. "It cannot plan anything. It cannot escape. The protocols are foolproof." But Rebecca was right. Subject 17 was planning. It had been planning from the moment it woke up from the modifications, calculating every variable, analyzing every weakness in the system, waiting for the perfect moment to act. The dreams got worse. Not just my dreams, but everyone's. We all started having the same nightmare. We would be in our rooms, lying in our beds, when we would hear a sound at the door, a soft scratching like fingernails on metal. And then the door would open, and Subject 17 would be standing there, backlit by the fluorescent lights in the hallway, its face hidden in shadow. It would walk toward us slowly, deliberately, and then it would reach out and touch us. And when it touched us, we would feel ourselves changing, our bodies transforming, our minds expanding and contracting at the same time. And then we would wake up, gasping, our hearts racing, our skin covered in sweat. James started sleeping with the lights on. Rebecca started taking sleeping pills, double doses that knocked her out but gave her no rest. Lisa stopped sleeping altogether, surviving on coffee and stimulants, her hands shaking constantly, her eyes bloodshot and wild. And then there were the whispers. I started hearing them about 3 months before the escape. They would come late at night when the facility was quiet, when everyone else was asleep. Soft voices, barely audible, speaking in a language I did not understand. At first, I thought it was just the ventilation system, the sound of air moving through the ducts. But the more I listened, the more I realized that the whispers had structure, rhythm, meaning. I was not the only one who heard them. David told me he heard them too, always at 3:00 a.m., always the same pattern of sounds. Emily said she heard them in the showers, echoing off the tiles. Robert said he heard them in the labs, coming from the speakers even when the intercom was turned off. We tried to record the whispers, to capture them on audio equipment so we could analyze them. But every time we tried, the recordings came back empty, just static and white noise. It was as if the whispers existed only in our minds, planted there by something we could not see or understand. Dr. Hoffman refused to acknowledge any of it. "You are all experiencing symptoms of isolation psychosis," he said. "It is common in extreme environments. Take your medication, get some rest, and it will pass." But it did not pass. It got worse. 2 months before the escape, Subject 17 stopped eating entirely. We would deliver meals to its cell and it would not even look at them. The food would sit there untouched until we came to collect it again. Dr. Hoffman was concerned at first, worried that Subject 17 was dying, that we were losing our most successful experiment. But when we ran medical scans, we found that Subject 17 was perfectly healthy. Better than healthy, actually. Its body had adapted to extract energy from other sources. The air, maybe. or something else we could not detect. It is evolving beyond the need for food, Lisa said. She sounded excited, almost manic. This is exactly what we wanted. It is becoming something new, something better. Or it is becoming something dangerous, I said. Lisa glared at me. You do not understand. This is a breakthrough. This is what we have been working toward. We are not working toward anything, I said. We are just watching something change, and we have no idea what it is becoming. Lisa did not respond. She just turned back to her monitors, her fingers flying over the keyboard, pulling up data and graphs and charts that meant nothing to me. 1 month before the escape, the power outages started. They were brief at first, lasting only a few seconds. The lights would flicker, the computers would reset, and then everything would come back online. Dr. Hoffman blamed it on the generator, said it was old and needed maintenance. But when the engineers inspected it, they found nothing wrong. The outages became more frequent. Several times a day, the facility would plunge into darkness, the only light coming from the emergency backup systems. And during those outages, we would hear things: footsteps in the corridors, doors opening and closing, and always that low, resonant hum that made my bones ache. I started keeping a journal, documenting everything I observed, everything I felt. I knew that something was coming, something terrible, and I wanted there to be a record, evidence of what we had done and what we had created. I filled 3 notebooks with my observations, my theories, my fears. I hid them in my room, tucked under my mattress, hoping that if anything happened to me, someone would find them and understand. 2 weeks before the escape, Patricia disappeared. She was a technician who worked in specimen storage, a quiet woman in her 40s who kept to herself. She went down to containment level 1 for a routine inventory check and never came back. We searched the entire facility, every room, every corridor, every closet, but there was no sign of her. It was as if she had simply vanished into thin air. Dr. Hoffman declared it an accident. She must have fallen and hit her head, he said, or had a medical emergency. We will find her. But we never did, and after a week, Dr. Hoffman stopped looking. We have more important things to focus on, he said. We cannot let one incident derail our entire operation. But I knew it was not an accident. I knew that Subject 17 was responsible somehow. I could feel it in my gut, a cold certainty that made my skin crawl. 1 week before the escape, I had a conversation with Lisa that I will never forget. It was late, past midnight, and I found her in the observation room, staring at Subject 17 through the glass. She looked exhausted, her face gaunt, her eyes hollow. "Do you ever regret it?" I asked her. "Regret what?" "All of this, creating Subject 17, playing God." Lisa was silent for a long time. Then she said, "Every day, but it is too late now. We cannot undo what we have done." "We could terminate the experiment," I said. "We could end it before it goes any further." Lisa shook her head. Dr. Hoffman would never allow it, and even if he did, I do not think we could. Subject 17 is too strong now, too aware. If we tried to kill it, I think it would kill us first. "Then what do we do?" "We wait," Lisa said, "and we hope that we are wrong." But we were not wrong, we were right. And 1 week later, Subject 17 escaped. The night of the escape, I was in my room trying to sleep but failing. The whispers were louder than ever, filling my head with sounds I could not understand. I got up and walked to the door, pressing my ear against the metal, listening. The hallway outside was silent, too silent. The ventilation system, which normally hummed constantly, was off. The lights in my room flickered once, twice, and then went out completely. I stood in the darkness, my heart pounding, waiting for the emergency lights to kick in. But they did not. The facility remained dark, and then I heard it. That sound. The sound I had been hearing in my dreams for months. A low, resonant hum that vibrated through the walls, through the floor, through my bones. And then the siren started. After the escape, after I had locked myself in the maintenance closet and waited in terror for hours, I eventually emerged to find the facility abandoned. Not just empty, but abandoned in a way that felt wrong. The lights were back on, flickering and unstable. The air had a strange smell to it, like ozone and something else, something organic and decaying. I walked through the corridors, calling out for anyone, hoping to find survivors, but there was no one. The cafeteria was empty, the tables overturned, the floor covered in broken glass and spilled food. The labs were in chaos, equipment smashed, computers destroyed, specimens scattered across the floor. And everywhere I looked there were signs of violence. Blood on the walls, deep gouges in the metal, handprints burned into the steel as if by intense heat. I found the control room. The door was torn off its hinges, lying on the floor in a twisted heap. Inside, the consoles were destroyed, the monitors shattered, the keyboards ripped out and thrown across the room. And on the main screen, the one that was still functioning, there was a message. It was written in the same language I had seen Subject 17 tracing on its cell walls, symbols and characters that looked almost like writing but were not quite human. I took a picture of it with my phone, hoping that maybe someday I could find someone who could translate it. But deep down, I think I already knew what it said. It was a warning, or maybe a promise. I made my way to the elevator and took it to the surface. When I stepped out into the Arctic air, the cold hit me like a physical blow. But I barely felt it. I was numb, shock and exhaustion dulling my senses. I walked to the nearest surface building and barricaded myself inside, piling crates and equipment against the door. For 3 days I waited. I rationed the food I found, mostly protein bars and freeze-dried meals. I melted snow for water. I slept in brief, fitful bursts, waking every few hours in a panic, convinced that Subject 17 was outside, waiting for me. During those 3 days, I saw things on the ice, shapes moving in the distance, too far away to identify but too purposeful to be random. Once, I thought I saw Subject 17 standing on a ridge, silhouetted against the pale sun. It stood there for hours, perfectly still, and then it turned and walked away. On the 3rd day, I heard the sound of an engine. The supply plane was early. I ran outside, waving my arms, shouting at the top of my lungs. The plane landed and 2 men stepped out, bundled in heavy parkas and goggles. They looked at me like I was a ghost. "What happened here?" one of them asked. "You need to leave," I said. "You need to leave right now." "Where is everyone else?" "Gone, they are all gone. We need to leave." They took me back to Anchorage, and from there I was flown to a military base in Colorado. I was held in isolation for 2 weeks while they debriefed me, asking me the same questions over and over. What happened at Kodiak? Where are the other researchers? What was Subject 17? I told them everything, and they did not believe me. They said I was delusional, that I had suffered a psychotic break caused by isolation and stress. They showed me their investigation reports. The team they sent to Kodiak found no bodies, no blood, no evidence of any struggle. The facility was empty and intact, aside from some minor equipment damage. The security footage had been wiped, but they said that could have been a malfunction or sabotage by me in my unstable mental state. They released me after 6 weeks, with a diagnosis of acute stress disorder and a prescription for antipsychotics. They made me sign additional non-disclosure agreements, threatening me with imprisonment if I ever spoke about Kodiak to anyone. But I am speaking now, because I cannot carry this alone anymore, and because people need to know. I moved to Portland and tried to rebuild my life. I found work at a small university, teaching introductory biology courses and running a modest research lab. I rented a small apartment near the campus, a 1-bedroom place on the 3rd floor with a view of the street. I tried to live normally, to forget about Kodiak and Subject 17 and everything that had happened in that frozen hell. But I could not forget. The nightmares continued, the whispers continued, and the feeling that I was being watched, that feeling never went away. 6 months after Kodiak, I started noticing things. Small things at first. News reports about strange incidents. A family in Idaho claimed their son had come home after being missing for a week, but he was different, changed in ways they could not explain. A woman in Nevada said her husband had been acting strangely since returning from a camping trip, that he seemed to know things he should not know, that his eyes looked wrong in certain lights. I collected these reports, printing them out and pinning them to the wall of my apartment, connecting them with red string like a detective in a conspiracy movie. I knew how it looked. I knew it made me seem crazy. But I also knew that I was not crazy. I knew that Subject 17 was out there, and it was doing something, changing people, spreading whatever it had become. 1 year after Kodiak, I received a letter. It was delivered to my apartment, addressed to me by name, with no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a message written in that same strange language I had seen on the control room monitor, and beneath it in English were 3 words. I remember you. I burned the letter immediately, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the match, but the message was already burned into my mind. I started taking precautions. I installed extra locks on my door. I bought a gun, even though I had never owned one before. I stopped going out at night. I stopped talking to people, cutting myself off from friends and colleagues. I became paranoid, jumping at every sound, seeing threats in every shadow. And then, 18 months after Kodiak, I saw it. I was walking home from the university late in the evening. The streets were empty, the shops closed, the only light coming from the street lamps overhead. And then I saw someone standing on the corner watching me. It was too far away to see clearly, but I felt a chill run down my spine. I knew. I just knew. I turned and ran. I ran as fast as I could, my lungs burning, my heart hammering. I did not look back. I did not stop until I reached my apartment building, fumbling with my keys, bursting through the door and slamming it behind me. I stood in my apartment, gasping for breath, waiting for a knock on the door or the sound of footsteps in the hallway. But nothing came. I was alone. Or at least I thought I was alone. That night I had the dream again. Subject 17 standing at the foot of my bed, reaching out to touch me. But this time when it touched me, I did not wake up. I stayed in the dream, feeling that cold spreading through my body, feeling myself changing. And then Subject 17 spoke. "You were kind to me, Nathan," it said, "and I will be kind to you. When the time comes, I will remember that." I woke up screaming, and when I looked at my hand, I saw something that made my blood run cold. There on my palm was a mark, a symbol, burned into my skin as if by a branding iron. It was one of the symbols from Subject 17's language, one of the symbols I had seen in the control room. I went to the hospital, told them I had burned myself cooking. They bandaged it, gave me ointment, told me it would heal in a few weeks, but it never did. The mark is still there, faint but visible, a constant reminder of what I witnessed, of what I survived. I am writing this now, 2.5 years after the escape, because I know my time is running out. The signs are all around me. The news reports are increasing. More and more people are changing, becoming something other than human. And I know that Subject 17 is behind it, that it is spreading whatever it has become, that it is building something, preparing for something. I do not know what will happen when that something arrives, but I know it will be soon. If you are watching this video, if you are listening to my story, then I need you to do something for me. I need you to be vigilant. I need you to watch the people around you, to notice if they change, if they become something different. And if you see someone with dark eyes that reflect nothing, someone who moves too smoothly, someone who seems to know things they should not know, then you need to run. You need to get as far away as possible. And if you see someone with a mark on their palm, a symbol that looks like writing but is not quite human, then you need to know that they have been touched by Subject 17. They have been marked, and they are changing, slowly but surely, into something new. I do not know if I am changing. I do not know if the mark on my palm means that I am becoming like Subject 17, or if it is just a reminder, a brand to show that I was there, that I witnessed what we created. But I feel different lately. I feel things I should not feel. I know things I should not know. And sometimes, late at night, I look in the mirror and I see my eyes, and they look darker than they used to be, deeper, like pools of oil. I am afraid of what I am becoming, but I am also curious, because if I am changing, then maybe I will finally understand. Maybe I will finally know what Subject 17 knows, see what it sees, feel what it feels. And maybe, just maybe, I will understand why it let me live. Before I finish this story, I want to leave you with one final thought. If you made it this far through my account, if you listened to everything I had to say, then please, take a moment to hit that subscribe button and share this video with everyone you know. Not for me, but for humanity. Because the more people who know about Subject 17, the more people who are aware of what is coming, the better chance we have of surviving what comes next. We created something in that facility beneath the ice. We created something that should never have existed. And now it is loose in the world, walking among us, changing us, preparing us for something we cannot even imagine. The Arctic taught me that there are things beyond our understanding, things that exist in the spaces between what we know and what we fear. And Subject 17 is one of those things. It is evolution taken to its logical extreme. It is humanity stripped of its limitations and rebuilt into something new, something perfect, something terrifying. And it is coming. I do not know when, I do not know how, but I know it is coming. And when it does, the world will change forever. My name is Nathan. I am 32 years old. I worked in a genetics facility in the Arctic where the test subject escaped. And I am telling you this story not to scare you, but to warn you, to prepare you, to give you a chance to understand what we have unleashed upon the world. Because Subject 17 is not just a failed experiment. It is not just a monster created by hubris and ambition. It is the future. It is what humanity will become, whether we want it or not. And the only question that remains is this: will we survive the transition? I do not know the answer, but I hope we will. I hope that somewhere out there, someone smarter than me, someone braver than me, will find a way to stop what is coming, or at least to slow it down, to give humanity a fighting chance. But if they do not, if no one stops it, then I want this video to serve as a record, a testament to what we did and what we became, so that when the future looks back at us, they will understand. They will know that we tried, that we pushed the boundaries of science and discovery, and that we paid the price for our ambition. The mark on my palm is glowing now, faintly, but it is definitely glowing. I can see it when I turn off the lights, a soft blue light that pulses in rhythm with my heartbeat. I do not know what it means, but I think it means that Subject 17 knows where I am, that it is calling me, that soon, very soon, I will understand everything. And maybe that is not such a bad thing. Maybe understanding is better than fear. Maybe knowing is better than wondering. Or maybe I am just trying to comfort myself as I face the inevitable. Either way, my time is running out, and I wanted to get this story out there before it is too late. Before I become something else. Before I stop being Nathan and start being something new. Thank you for listening. Thank you for believing, or at least for considering that maybe, just maybe, my story is true. And please remember what I told you. Watch for the signs. Stay vigilant. And if you see Subject 17, if you recognize it for what it is, then run. Run as far and as fast as you can. Because it is out there, and it is waiting. This is Nathan, signing off for the last time. And if you never hear from me again, you will know what happened. You will know that Subject 17 came for me, just like I always knew it would. The test subject escaped, and it is still out there, evolving, changing, preparing. And soon, very soon, the world will know what we created in that frozen hell beneath the ice. God help us all.